Fighting with My Family is directed by Stephen Merchant and is starring Florence Pugh, Jack Lowden, Nick Frost, Lena Headey, Vince Vaughn, and of course a cameo by none other than The Rock. Before I go any further, I just want to say there will not be any plot spoilers in this review. This is the real-life story of the rise of former superstar professional wrestler Paige, who hailed from England and grew up in a wrestling family and a small kind of indie wrestling circuit that was run by her father, and this is the story of how she got all the way from there, all the way to rising into superstar fame in the WWE. Now, I was born in the late 80s and grew up predominantly in the 1990s, and at that time, the WWF, or now what it is known as the WWE, was definitely on the rise in popularity. A lot of people consider the 1990s perhaps the golden age of professional wrestling in that regard, but I was a big fan growing up. I had all of the action figures, I watched the pay-per-views, I remember when Monday Night Raw first appeared, when SmackDown first appeared, I used to record them on VHS tape and all that kind of stuff. In the 2000s, I kind of drifted away from wrestling, and I haven't really gone back since. Once in a while, you come across a story or storylines or characters or people from the wrestling world, so you can't quite help tuning into things like that. So when this film came out, I was initially kind of reluctant on seeing it because, I wasn't familiar with Paige. If you're curious, Paige is actually a stage name and her real name is Saraya Knight. She's from the Knight wrestling family in England, and I wasn't aware of her rise to stardom or how unique it was. Kind of almost a rags to riches story. And what is also interesting about this film is that it is produced by The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who seemingly has his hands in a lot of projects these days, both on the small screen and the big screen. And this film is also produced by the WWE Film Production Company, which doesn't really put out a lot of great films. And I have to say, this is their best film because it is a real, genuine human story that I think a lot of people can connect to, even if you have no idea about anything when it comes to professional wrestling. If you've never watched a match in your life, you will be able to connect with this film because the characters are so great. You have the character of Paige and her brother Zach, who are both this kind of wrestling tandem, and they're just kind of playing in really, really small venues, just trying to make their way up in the wrestling world and catch a big break. And if you've seen from the trailers, Paige is the one who kind of breaks through the ceiling to get to the next level, to eventually get to the WWE and become a superstar. And her brother is kind of left behind in a certain way. And what the film really does very well is you see the parallel story of their journeys, both together initially and then apart when she moves on to trying to get into the WWE. And I really love the way their two stories parallel one another in their struggles and their hardships, and the way they are able to overcome those hardships and those struggles, I think were really fantastic. Florence Pugh as Saraya or Paige, I think is absolutely fantastic in this film. I think she nails the character so poignantly and so perfect. Jack Lowden, who plays her brother, I think is just as good. And I really love Nick Frost and Lena Headey as their parents, who are just absolutely hilarious in this film. They are, this kind of broguish, Green Street Hooligans type of, British people who don't really have a censor or a filter when it comes to the way they talk. They say some outlandish things that come across very comedic and very genuinely comedic because that is just who they are. I think Stephen Merchant's timing when it comes to comedy in this film as a director is really, really good. He knows when to put the comedy in there, but he also knows when to lay off the comedy to make the drama very genuine and to really balance the film really, really well. This film does touch on a lot of universal themes when it comes to pursuing one's dreams, overcoming obstacles, doing all of those things that a lot of us have to go through in life. I think are all fantastically well laid out in this film and really gives us a sense to connect with this story and connect with these characters. When it comes to the overall negatives I have with this film, it does unfortunately cater to the usual overall plot cliches that a lot of these sports stories and a lot of these underdog stories kind of adhere to. So it's not necessarily a plot you haven't seen before. And that can really hinder the film because it makes the film very predictable, and it doesn't really help that we already know where she ends up with at the end of this film. But another problem I have with it is that some of the steps she takes to get to her overall goal, I think is kind of truncated when it comes to the actual real life events. It actually took her a lot longer to get where she needed to get in this film, but of course, all films take artistic license when they are adapting real life things, so that you kind of have to excuse to a certain extent, but it still is a little bothersome when she's trying to literally go from nothing to go all the way to the pinnacle of, professional wrestling. But with all that being said, I'm going to give this film a 3.8 out of 5 stars. It is a very heartfelt, genuine, well-acted, well-directed, funny, and dramatic film, and I really enjoyed watching this story, and I really was able to connect with the story on a personal level as I'm trying to pursue my life and my goals as well. So that has been my review of Fighting With My Family. If you like this video, please check out the other videos on my channel.